So for those of you that were here in the winter, you remember that we were studying in the merit of a recovery for our friend Aviva Galia Basima, and I'm ecstatic to report that the last we heard is that she is totally cancer-free.
Wow.
It's part of our tradition when we give charity or we do a mitzvah, when we study, to do it in the merit of something. And I think all of the good doctors that she had and all of our studying have paid off. I was disappointed, however, a friend of mine is very sick, as is his mother. He was caring for his mother, and he then got sick, and very sick. So James, the son of Anita, and Anita, the daughter of Anna, we're studying in the merit of them both to recover fully from their illnesses. So I grew up studying, so I'm Jeff Stier. I grew up in New Jersey. I live in New York and here. And I was a student at Yeshiva University, but I try to always be a student and continue to learn. And I learned some new things about the holiday in preparing for this class. When I grew up, I was always told, Rosh Hashanah is the day of judgment. God is going to judge you for everything you've done in the last year. And Rosh Hashanah is your day to, go back and say, God, you're in charge. I'm sorry for everything I did. And, begin the process of teshuvah that culminates 10 days later on Yom Kippur. And it was always a very heavy holiday. God is judging you. That's kind of harsh, And maybe I didn't have the best year. I did some things I shouldn't have done. And it's like for me, it was always a heavy time. And through my studies, both in this great book, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur Survival Kit, that Rabbi Ben Siepstein recommended to me, and a really wonderful article I read on Esha Torah's website by Rabbi Asher Resnick, really was the basis for this class. And what I found out, what I kind of rediscovered, is that all of that trepidation and awe and fear that we have, that I at least had around Rosh Hashanah, was totally misplaced. And to the extent that you should feel trepidation, is that on this day, these 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, what an amazing opportunity we have. What a unique opportunity in this time. And the only thing that you should be scared about is not making the most of it. It's a very special time. And in the Jewish calendar, Judaism sees time differently than the rest of the world. The rest of the world sees time past, present, and future. It's normal. The present never happened before, and by the time we're done talking about it, it's the past, and then we're in the future. We never experienced the future, so it's this timeline, this straight timeline. In Judaism, we look at, obviously, time is moving forward, but in Judaism, we also look at it as almost a spiral. And as time moves on, going forward, it's also a spiral in the calendar. And in that time period that we're coming into now, so each year is moving forward, but we're repeating that same period of time as the last year and the year before. Each of those periods of time are imbued with certain characteristics and certain opportunities. So Passover is a time of renewal. It's in the spring. It's physical freedom, it's spiritual freedom. All of those things about Passover that were kind of created when the historical event happened, though that spiritual renewal and physical freedom always exists each year in that spiral of time. As we move forward, we can tap into that almost mystical thing going on in that year, in that time of year, is a great opportunity for us. So before we talk about any specific holidays, it's good to look at the spiral of time in Judaism. That's how we see it. And it's Rabbi Resnick calls it a metaphysical window of opportunity. Now, we could always have renewal, it doesn't have to be on Passover, but it's a time that is really geared towards that happening. When we see, flowers budding, it just meant for renewal. And this time of year, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur also have certain windows of opportunity that we're going to get into. And the idea that we're being judged, I think a lot of people misconstrue that. And it leads to some interesting questions about the holiday that we'll get into. And then we're going to answer those questions that I think will give us all a brand new insight into what that holiday is and why we ought to be so excited and have some trepidation, not that we're being judged, but rather that this is a great opportunity for us as individuals. So there are 3 clues that help us understand any holiday. And those clues are, what is the historical event? So Passover, freedom, we were let out of Egypt, we became free. What are the mitzvot, the commandments and the customs around that holiday? Jody has apples and honey for us, so we want to have a sweet new year. And third is, what is the name of the holiday? For those of you that studied with us this winter, you know that names aren't just tags on something. They actually, in Judaism, the name of a person and the name of a holiday actually suggests its essence, and the word itself has meaning. So when we're trying to understand what is the metaphysical window of opportunity of any holiday, we looked at what are the historical events that led to it, what are the mitzvos, the commandments and customs that we have for that holiday, and then what is the name of the holiday. And those are always a guide towards figuring out what the true meaning, the mystical meaning and the mystical opportunity of that holiday is. So for Rosh Hashanah, we have 3 questions. Right, Passover, how many questions?
4.
4 questions for Passover.
I'm there for you.
So Rosh Hashanah is easier, right? It's 25% less hard. There are only 3 questions that we're going to struggle with tonight. And those are, Rosh Hashanah is about judgment, and Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. We atone for our sins. So if you think logically, if we're being judged, shouldn't we, you agree with me, right? Yummy. Shouldn't we agree that if we have an opportunity for an atonement and we have an opportunity for judgment, shouldn't we atone before the judgment? Like, what good is Yom Kippur going to do us? Oh, thank you for the cover. I wanted an apple. Shouldn't we atone first before judgment?
When the Mashiach comes, thank you, he is here to judge and teach. Well, how would you know what to atone for if you don't know exactly what's wrong? What the rules are, especially even though there are 617 from the agreed upon medieval age of rabbis, like, who's to say? To ask 2 Jews to agree on even one thing. It's hard.
True. Yeah, so there's a good point, is we have to have an understanding of what's wanted of us.
Yes.
But how can we be judged without atoning? So that's the first question. Shouldn't the order be the other way around? If we're being judged, shouldn't we have atonement first and then be judged? I'm an attorney by training, and as a lawyer, you want to go into a trial and have all the question marks addressed. You want to be prepared. Why would you do that after the trial? It makes no sense. And as long as we're talking about trials and judgments, I want to tell you that what we're going to study tonight is Rosh Hashanah, that trial that God is judging us, which he is judging us, but not in the way we may have thought. It is the most corrupt trial ever taken place. To our benefit, and we have a cheat sheet. We know how to win the trial. It's served to us on a platter like apples and honey. We have to tap into it. And so this judgment, that's kind of the first thing about the judgment. If you look at it as a trial, it is really just, from someone who has studied the legal system, it's the most, and James, who we're studying in honor of his recovery, is a New York State Supreme Court judge. So like, I'm very involved in the legal system. And when you look at the judgment that we have on Rosh Hashanah, it violates like every principle of good court behavior, because it's all tilted in our favor if we tap into it. So going back to those questions, the first question is, since we're being judged, shouldn't we have atonement first before we're being judged? What type of judgment is this? I've been kind of dancing around that. Is we're being judged. What does that mean? How are we being judged? And the third question, so the first question is, how are we being judged? What does that mean? The second question is, if we're being judged, shouldn't we have Yom Kippur first? Shouldn't we atone first? And the third question is about this judgment. we're going to get into the fact that what is the nature of the judgment? We're going to learn that we're being, and this is going to be the first mystical secret that we're going to uncover. On Rosh Hashanah, we are being judged in the moment. We're not being judged for the last year. It's not like we're walking in and there's a prosecutor that says, Jeff did this wrong and Jeff did that wrong. In April he did this, and that's not the type of, that's kind of how we see judgment. But Rosh Hashanah it's a different type of judgment, and we're going to get into that. The judgment of Rosh Hashanah is taught to us on the first day of the holiday. We read a portion of the Bible that's relevant. And in that portion of the Bible, it's kind of a weird portion. Yishmael, who is the father of the Arab countries, is begging God, who's judging him, to save his life. And it says in the Bible that God saw Yishmael where he was. And one thing that we learned this winter is there are no extra words in the Bible. Every word in the Bible comes to teach you something. So why does it say God judged Yishmael where he was? Obviously, he was there. Wherever Yishmael was is where God judged him. Why did the Torah say God judged him where he was? It doesn't mean physically where it was. It meant where Yishmael was at that moment. Because God knew. God knows the past, God knows the present, and God knows the future. God knows some of the terrible things that Yishmael's children, grandchildren, God knew about October 7th, and the descendants of Yishmael did that to us. So when God judged Yishmael favorably and saved his life where he was, God wasn't judging Yishmael on his future actions. Obviously, if God was judging Ishmael on his future actions, God would have wiped him out for many of the atrocities of the descendants of Ishmael. But God was judging Ishmael at that moment. And we read that on Rosh Hashanah because if God judged Ishmael in that way, I'm only judging you now where you are at this moment in time, in the present, not for the past. There's also a Talmud which says that the judgment is not for the, so with Yishmael, the judgment is not about the future. It's not about what Yishmael is going to do or his descendants are going to do. But it's also not about the past. It's where he was at that moment.
I have a question.
Yes.
Does any of the judgment come from within Yishmael?
So Yishmael was judged for who he was
No.
at that moment. The judgment of us,
No, judging of himself. Does he judge himself at all? Is he involved at all in that judgment?
that kind of gets to the central point of these holidays. I don't know, I don't want to answer because I don't know, but it's a good question because that's going to get into the introspection that we should be engaged in right now. So there's a Talmud, it was in the Jerusalem Talmud, it says, even if an individual was not pure and straight in the past, as long as he is pure and straight in the present, on Rosh Hashanah itself, he will be judged positively. So if you put that together, the Jerusalem Talmud talking about Rosh Hashanah, that says we're not going to be judged for our past actions, we're only going to be judged for now, and you put in Yishmael not being judged in the future, the only time you can be judged for is now, is the present. So the first big takeaway is that on Rosh Hashanah, we are not being judged for our past. Yes, we'll be held to account. And we're not being held to account for our future. We are being judged for that moment, for that present. So for Rosh Hashanah, the secret that we have to have is you're living in the present, right? You're living in the moment. You're grabbing what you want, and that's being in the moment. And we can learn from everybody. I want to be like that, right? Yeah. On Rosh Hashanah, we can live in the moment just like you and be judged positively. If that's the first part of this corrupt trial, is that the past doesn't bother us and the future doesn't bother us. And I want to quote, and one of the things I really like about the run for their lives is that we don't talk politics, and we're not going to talk politics here. But some of you may have heard a quote from, and this is not an endorsement, What can be unburdened by what has been is a famous refrain that Kamala Harris has said hundreds of times, and sometimes mocked for. But the judgment of Rosh Hashanah is about what can be unburdened by the past. So you may have not always been living up to what you can do. On Rosh Hashanah, you should say, that past is behind me. And we talked about the meaning of the word of the holiday. So Rosh Hashanah is the head, literally, is translated Rosh Hashanah. Doug, Rosh means Rosh Hashanah.
I'm not good.
Rosh is the head, and Shana is
Beautiful?
the year.
Oh.
So the head of the year. Now, if you're being judged, usually, if you're being judged on your class in school, you don't have an exam at the beginning of the year. You have an exam when? At the end of the semester.
Sure.
Rosh Hashanah is not the end of the semester. It's not called end of the year. It's called head of the year, the beginning of the year. It's forward looking. So not to be unburdened by your past. Rosh Hashanah, as Jody said, is an opportunity to start anew. It is a blank slate. You don't have to worry about the past on Rosh Hashanah. You don't have to say, I'm limited, I'm not such a great person. I did bad things last year, so I'm probably going to do bad things this year. It is a gift, it is a blank slate, it is that mystical moment of that day, the strength of that day, is that it is meant for a clean slate. God created the world. It's the birthday of the world, Karen pointed out. We say that on Rosh Hashanah. Today is the birthday of the world. But actually, technically speaking, while we say that and it's true, it's actually Rosh Hashanah's date. Rosh Hashanah's date is actually the date that Adam was brought into the world, which we know is on the 6th day, not on the first day. So it makes you ask a question. What is it about Rosh Hashanah? What is it about Adam's birthday? And why do we say the birthday of the world? What is it that makes humans different from everything that had been created before? There were animals, there were dogs, everything was there except humans. What makes humans different from everything else that had been created is that we have free will. Free will. And free will is the ability to make choices in the moment. Usually we think of human beings in Judaism, we think of, well, we're a body and we're a soul. And Rosh Hashanah is about the soul, right? We go to the doctor to take care of our body. Rosh Hashanah is for the soul. But there's another aspect to humanity, and it's a distinguishing aspect. It is free will. We have free will. And that's exactly what Rosh Hashanah is celebrating. In the birthday of the world, the birthday actually of mankind, what was created that was new in mankind was the notion of free will. It says man was created in the image of God. What does that mean, in the image of God? We don't know what God looks like. The idea is, in the image of God means that we have the ability to make our choices. And on Rosh Hashanah, we are being judged not for the past and not for the future, but in the moment. And what does in the moment mean? It means right now, we're not burdened by our past. We may have high hopes and we may not succeed in our wishes. But in the moment now, if we have true intentions, because we say that, careful, if we say that God judges us in the moment, God is judging us for our free will. It's not a test of our bodies. It's not even a counting of our souls. Our souls are a cumulative effect of everything we've done before. Everything we've done, all the good and all the bad, it affects us just like our bodies. If we eat good, if we eat bad, if we exercise, if we don't exercise, it's a cumulative effect of everything in the past. Our souls are the same way. We're affected by what we've done. But the idea of free will equals present. Free will is now. Now I have the ability to make a choice in this moment, and I have the ability to choose my future. And as long as your mindset is realistic, you can't say, it's Rosh Hashanah, I'm being judged, so I'm going to be a pure person this year, and wink, and then go back to your bad ways. We say on Rosh Hashanah, God knows what we're thinking too. So if you can authentically take advantage in that moment and grasp onto the unique characteristic of the day, of the notion that we have free will, and we are now taking this moment to separate ourselves from our busy lives, from all the distractions that we have, and tap into the power of the day. Not to be like, oh, I'm being judged and all these things I did bad, which gets back to the clue number 2 about the holiday and the practices we have on that holiday. If you look at the Rosh Hashanah prayers, which are overwhelmingly long, you will notice something missing. On Yom Kippur, we say, Achet, I did this, I did that. We hit our chests. I did this sin, I did that sin. We name every sin out there. Oh, it's rough. We don't do that on Rosh Hashanah. On the day of judgment, on the day where we think we're being judged, we don't apologize, we don't acknowledge. Instead, Rosh Hashanah's prayers are all about the whole world should recognize God. We should all have peace. Everybody, all of the Jewish people, the whole world should be healthy and happy and peaceful. If you're going into a court of law for judgment, you're not going to be worried about the whole world. You're worried about yourself. You're going to defend yourself. Because Rosh Hashanah is not that type of judgment. Rosh Hashanah is a judgment of your free will, of yourself in the present and where you hope to go in the future. So it's a very unusual, it defies our understanding, or at least our secular understanding of judgment. And that's why I say it's such a corrupt trial. Could you imagine that someone who did something really bad, they're being judged, and he goes, you know what, Judge, I'm a good person right now. Throw it, maybe in New York they do that.
Yeah.
But generally, good judgment takes into account the history. Rosh Hashanah doesn't do that. We don't ask for forgiveness for our sins on Rosh Hashanah because we are not being judged for our past. We're not being judged for our sins. Yom Kippur we'll deal with next week. It may be a little bit heavier. But Rosh Hashanah is such a wonderful opportunity. And that leads to the third question, which is, why doesn't Yom Kippur come first? Well, we know because we don't have to atone at Rosh Hashanah. We have to get the right mindset. And I gave a lot of analogies in our class over the winter. We talked about someone named the Maggid of Dubno, who was famous for telling stories. And all of his very interesting stories taught a point. And he was the most famous Jewish storyteller of all time. And the most famous story was about why he came up with such perfect analogies. Does anyone remember the story about the Maggid of Dubno when they said to him, how do you always come up, Luis?
Yeah.
How do you always come up with such a perfect story? I have a story to tell you that. Right? How do you have such a good story? It's like, we have 3 questions tonight. Why do Jews always answer a question with another question? Why not?
Exactly.
So the Maggid of Dubno said, someone came to him and said, you have a perfect analogy for everything. How do you have the perfect analogy for everything? He goes, I have an analogy. There was a young boy in the forest with a bow and arrow, and he was shooting. And he hit every target, was bullseye, the middle of the bullseye. And an older man walked through the forest and he saw bullseye after bullseye after bullseye. And when he saw the young boy shooting the arrow, he said, oh my gosh, I've never seen you such a wonderful marksman. How did you do it? How did you get the bullseye every single time? And he goes, oh, that's easy. First I shoot the arrow, then I paint the target. Right, so the Maggid of Dubno was explaining how he has a perfect story for everything. Well, I have a perfect story to illustrate this idea about the order of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which is seemingly backwards. We should have atonement first before judgment. And we know a little bit of why that is, because judgment isn't what we really thought it was. So we have some professional drivers in the class, so this is not about you, okay? But imagine a driver. Let's say you were driving. You want to sit on my lap? You want to sit on my lap?
He'll let you do it for a second.
Yeah, no,
You just pick
maybe
him up.
later. So imagine a driver. Come on.
Yeah, just give it a shot.
So imagine a driver who's got a banged up car in the front, in the back. There are lots of accidents. And he says, you know what? It's Rosh Hashanah, it's the time of judgment. I'm going to go take my car into the shop, into the body shop, and get it fixed. Now we know this is not a true story because the mechanic, the body shop, was actually an honest guy. And he said to the driver, I'll fix your car. You've obviously had a lot of accidents. But think about this. Before I fix your car, why don't you take some driving lessons and fix the underlying problem, and then when you got it all straightened out, then come back and I'll fix your car. There's no point in me fixing your car now other than enriching myself, because you're going to be obviously back here in a couple weeks with more dents. So that is the analogy for Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is the time where we can set our values, focus on our free will, think about what are our values for the year that we want to have, express our free will by tapping into that mystical idea that this holiday is a blank slate, and improve our driving. Yom Kippur will deal with the dents. And in fact, if you look at the Jewish calendar, we are right now in the month of Elul. It's a whole month that we have before Rosh Hashanah, and you are here now doing it. Kudos to you. We are now preparing. We're taking part of that 30-day preparation for Rosh Hashanah. The period of Yom Kippur, when we atone for our sins, is only 10 days. Because if you do the work, and if you're here studying, and if you think about what your priorities are for the year, so that when you, on game day, when you walk into Rosh Hashanah, you know what your priorities are. You, in the moment of that free will, express who you are and who you want to be. Yom Kippur is going to be easy, because those dents, you'll fix them. It's like a mechanical, physical problem that you can fix. But why fix it until you address the underlying issues, until you exercise your free will? And there are so many, I talk about the trial is so slanted, it's so corrupt. Everything around us on Rosh Hashanah, we eat a pomegranate. Do you know why we eat a pomegranate? How many seeds are there in a pomegranate? 613 seeds. And when I was in elementary school, I counted. And I have ADD, so I usually lost count in the 200s. But they say, my rabbi told me there are 613 seeds in a pomegranate that represent the 613 commandments. The apple and the honey. The sound of the shofar is there to awaken us. It is a blast that exceeds words. We go into Rosh Hashanah and we say all these words, but the true essence of what we're trying to express is beyond, it transcends words. So we have the very powerful sounding of the shofar. We think about other customs related to the holiday. We have something called simanim, or signs. We have like we have a Passover Seder, we have a Rosh Hashanah Seder, where we eat different foods. We eat dates because they're significant. We eat carrots. We talked about gematria, the numerical value of words. Each letter adds up. The Hebrew word for carrot is gezer. I forget what it adds up to, but it adds up to something really good. So we eat a carrot because of that. And it's almost like puns. We're saying because of the numerical value, we want to have a year like that. And the classic joke is, you eat a raisin and a stick of celery. Do you know why? Because this year I should have a raisin celery. No, that's not the official one, but that's always but they're all kind of a little bit like that. Because everything we do is for a positive, for not only for myself, but for everybody else. And that's the third clue, the second clue is we look to the customs of the day and the practices and the mitzvos, the commandments of the day, and the prayers of the day. And we're praying about all of Israel, but we're actually praying about the whole world. Jews care about the whole world. And that's a lesson for us for Rosh Hashanah, because if you want to exercise free will and you want to have the right values and you want to set the tone for the year, don't focus on yourself. That comes naturally. Focus on the community. Focus on the greater world. That's a lesson from the prayers of Rosh Hashanah, that if you want to have the right values, don't just think about yourself. Think about how you can help everybody else, because that's what we're praying for on Rosh Hashanah. I started the class by saying, on Rosh Hashanah, you should be praying, you would think, if you're being judged, you pray for yourself. You pray for your own forgiveness. But we don't do any of that. None of it is personal. And that's the idea, that's the moment. The prayers lead us into the right mindset of free will and having the right things. And all of the trappings of the holiday, if anyone has a thing, if you relate Rosh Hashanah to the apple and the honey, whatever it is, those things are all cheat sheets for our trial that God is serving to us on a silver platter because he wants us to win. it's tilted. This is the most corrupt trial ever in our favor. But all we have to do is use our knowledge and take advantage of our free will so that each individual and the entire nation and the whole world has a sweet, happy, and healthy new year. Thank you, everybody.